Hello everyone. Seems like my last comment from the previous KF3 video was right. This game does in fact have mixed reviews on release. So after putting way too many hours into the beta, and seeing the work the devs were doing following the delay, I decided to pre-order the game, thinking, they're actually going out of their way to fix these problems with the game. Surely a couple months is going to be enough time to do that. Now on release day, at the time I'm writing the script, I'm both blown away and just disappointed with how some things really turned out. Many aspects of the game, like the Zed and weapon designs, I already covered in my beta review, which I'll have linked if you'd like to check that out. But a lot of what I said in my beta review still holds up here. So instead I'm just going to go over what's different and what's the most important to talk about for this video. So this review is going to be structured similar to that previous video, going over the positives, the Unchanged, and then the negatives. Again, I'm not a paid shill for KF3 whatsoever, so this is entirely my opinion only. I'll keep this intro short as always, so let's get right into this. Alright, so to start things off, let's talk about what's improved. The maps got major upgrades. If you remember in the beta, we had about 3 maps present. All of them didn't really have the gritty and apocalyptic feel that Killing Floor usually goes for. This was especially apparent on old city streets. It was just in the middle of the day, the sun was way too bright, and it just felt like they evacuated everyone instead of just getting massacred by the Zeds. Since then, they actually gone back and revamped all the maps now. So now it really does feel like a Zed outbreak did happen at these locations, with everything being destroyed, bodies and blood littering the streets, and almost all of them taking place at night. This is quite literally a day and night difference. No pun intended. And now they actually included the rest of the maps, which to me, they all really do have that Killing Floor feeling to them. I was sort of right in my last review that these are going to be located in different parts of the world, as in half the maps take place in the west coast of the United States, as opposed to Europe like the previous games. They could have just changed the locations on these places to somewhere in Europe, and probably people wouldn't have ever noticed this. But hey, at least we got a map placed in Japan though. Why did Horzine change their base of operations from Europe to the US West Coast? Your guess is good as mine. Regardless, these maps are really fun to play on, and you can develop some interesting strategies with the holdout areas and map interactions with the multi-tool. So the UI was revamped, and it's more similar to KF2's. The UI they had from the beta, it just was not it, I'm sorry. It just didn't feel like Killing Floor whatsoever, but rather some generic shooter game. But since then, it actually completely remade the UI theme. While some elements are still the same, it does look much better and even closely resembles the KF2. While the HUD looks a lot better, everything else like the dozens of menus that they have in the lobby, I'm just kind of indifferent about. It doesn't really feel like I'm looking at something from Killing Floor, but it says some sci-fi game. The codex is I think the closest menu that does resemble a KF2 theme. And also another complaint, the HUD and in-game leaderboard. I wish there was an option to just use menus instead of physically going to the quote-unquote VTOL, so you could just load into a match. Over time I think that's going to get pretty annoying. The leaderboard has this text transition before you even see anything, which I have no idea why they add that. Ideally, you want your leaderboard to be snappy so you can briefly tab in and then get back into the game, but here's hoping that it's one of the quality of life fixes that they're planning on doing. And the gunplay got some improvements. So the perk and attachment progression is still pretty much the same. Collect materials, craft attachments, level them up to max, there you go. Similar for perks, I think a few skills got changed for balancing purposes, but they're pretty much still the same. They really don't feel forced at all, and leveling both of them comes naturally, so it doesn't feel like you're playing a match solely to grind it. What's different is recoil and some animations were changed, so now it feels like these weapons do have some kick to them. At least some of them. Their models haven't really changed at all, besides maybe adding some grime to it, so unfortunately the sci-fi theme is here to stay. While they're still futuristic, Tripwire posted the KF3 roadmap for the next year and a half, revealing one of the first updates that we're going to see. It will include some modern weaponry, and removing characters from being tied to perks. I really don't like the look of these sci-fi weapons for one reason or another, but if the roadmap is anything to go off of, I think this could sort of be like a Black Ops 3 situation. So think about it sort of like this. It's a futuristic setting, but later on the maps and the new weapons later down the line could be from our time, or maybe even further in the past. If that's the case, then I'm all for it. I can tolerate these futuristic weapons as long as Tripwire guarantees a good mix of present and future weapons in the following updates. There are other gameplay elements I wanted to talk about, sort of related to the guns, but that'll be later into the video since there's actually not really that much positive to talk about them. Anyways, this brings me to my next point. The roadmap seems promising. Okay, look, I've seen some people already complaining about the content drops we'll be seeing soon, and honestly, I don't really see what's wrong. I think they could have maybe worded a few things better here or there, but this just shows that Tripwire has no plans on abandoning the game. It really does seem like despite the mess that was the beta playtest, they've been hard at work trying to right these wrongs, with the delay following the beta's criticism and revealing content they'll be delivering soon. I do think the separation of perks should have just been at launch. That's one of the few things that did annoy me when I booted up the game for the first time and saw they just kept it unchanged. Alright, and next, the music is absolutely freaky. There's a mix of completely new songs for KF3 and remastered tracks from KF2, which continues to be a welcome surprise for me. There's even the boss theme for the Patriarch and the Matriarch as wave music, which I have no problem with. In KF1, Abandon All was the Patriarch's theme, and when you defeated him, it was recontextualized as your own theme, like you're triumphant over the main bad guy and he just stole his boss theme. I think it makes sense here, because I'm pretty sure it's canon still that the mercs did kill all the main bosses from KF2, not just their clones, so why not play as your own theme in Nightfall's combat playlist? I really hope new tracks are added over time. The roadmap doesn't really mention that at all, but man, the work they put into the music for this game is easily one of its biggest strengths, and you'd be crazy to play this game without the music. And one little thing I miss from KF2 is the little music indicator when the song plays. It showed the song's name and the artist briefly that worked on it. That was a really cool detail, even though I only think there's only 2 composers for KF3 so far. I think that small feature should have just stayed. So now the movement and Zeds. The devs did redo many of the Z animations and their attack patterns. No longer does it feel like the attacks are undodgeable with clunky movement options. To my knowledge, they've now went back and used the pristine mocap animations, which makes them look so much better. And the executions do feel like they happen more often, and you aren't accidentally killing Skrakes and Flesh Pounds before you can execute. Bro, what's wrong with the Skrake? He's like showing me his stump. The fuck? Yeah, I see him, man. Plus, they added back the headshot stumble animations, so Zeds are still trying to desperately attack you even though you shot their head off. It now really does feel like you're against an army who will fight tooth and nail until the very end. That's if everything is working as intended. Now with the movement. They did fix some things, but overall, I think it does still need some work in a future update. They changed how dashing works, so you can only dash in every direction but forward, which, oddly enough, it feels okay to use. Since the Z attack patterns are improved, you can now dodge things without it feeling like you just got lucky. The problem I have is that sprint and dashing are still the same button, so if you try to remap one or the other, it's going to feel just as clunky as it was before. I think they just should have just removed one or the other. Like if they kept sprinting, just make it so sprinting is faster in general so you can just use it as a dodge, so it's a replacement for dashing. But if they wanted to keep dashing, they should have just removed sprint, and to compensate for it, just make your base movement speed similar to sprint. Keeping both as a movement option just really feels like an odd choice. There's also the slide, which only really feels good as an alternative to dashing forward since they removed that. You can actually get a lot of distance with the slide. If you're going down a slope, let's say for example, it does have more utility than just dashing and sprinting because this gives you more breathing room. And the difficulty feels right, for the most part. On solo, less Zeds spawn to account for you being alone, but on multiplayer, it spawns hundreds, and it really feels like you're fighting an army sent to kill you in particular. The difficulty spike comes in towards the later waves when larger Zeds begin to spawn, so you'll have to actually coordinate with the team to fight the horde. But the difficulty reaches its peak during the boss wave, because these bosses are literal tanks. From what I remember in the beta, I could easily fight these guys, but what was hard was the undodgeable attacks and the health. Here, it seems like they didn't tweak the health at all, so it still remains, and a lot of my multiplayer matches now are just everyone dying within a few minutes of the fight, just leaving me and maybe one other person alone to fight 3 Impalers with attacks that can basically one-shot you. I don't think the average player is going to lock in like monies online to fight these guys for extra XP and a rare crafting material. Don't get me wrong. I like games that challenge the player with their boss fights, but when you start seeing a pattern with noobs dying instantly in almost every match, then maybe it's too much for them. I can understand that the new players just might not know how to dodge or they just forget to upgrade their armor, but I think changing some numbers with the boss health and maybe some weak spot multiplayers could mitigate these issues. Also, don't even get me started on trying to do Hell on Earth multiplayer. It's basically impossible since everyone's still low level right now, the networking issues that I'll talk about later. Alright, now for the Unchanged. These are going to be important things that were present in the beta, and they weren't tweaked at all or just not really that much. Okay, the shop wasn't changed at all. My biggest deal with the shop from the last video is the battle pass system and the pricing here. Despite all the fixes they made since the beta, this is one of the few aspects they just did not touch. And I'm going to be blunt here, none of these shop items on launch seem that interesting besides Classic Foster. And I think they know that, which is why they made him cost around $15 to make Foster look like his better design. A lot of the cosmetics here just really don't seem worth their price. But to play devil's advocate, I will say that there's a few cool looking outfits in the first battle pass, but to unlock them you gotta go through almost the entire pass just to get them. It's like I said before, how are we going to trust Tripwire that the quality of these content drops aren't going to spiral out of control like KF2 did towards the end of its own development? Out of all the things I'm worried about for the future of this game, this is easily the top 3 because of just the uncertainty of it. So the characters are somewhat unchanged, besides their appearances. Like the maps, they made the characters look a lot more dirty. And I think that's an okay change, but I still can't get over how Foster looks. They should have just made him look similar to his classic design by default. And now with the release, we get to hear more from the characters, and see if they're actually well written or not. I'll just let you guess which one it is. The dialogue on a lot of the characters just still make you roll your eyes. Foster's though, it really makes sense because he has a bunch of quips and acts overly cocky. That's just his character. But what annoys me about these characters is they talk. Like a lot. Way more than the combat and idle chatter from KF2. If you don't believe me and you have the game right now, just take out your knife and just start stabbing in the air. In almost every attack, they're going to say something about it.
Fresh from the whetstone, matey. Ah! I'll fucking fillet you for the family cat. Nice little slice. Who's ready for a treat?
Also, I wanted to mention this since no one else has. Foster sounds weird because he's missing his mask filter. In KF2, there's some trailers you might notice where he doesn't have his filter, so his voice sounds weird. But later on, they gave it to him. If they do the same here, I guarantee you at least half of the complaints with his voice would just go away.
No dying, not on my watch.
Good thing I'm not given to panic. Oh, I think I might have done a little wee. Oh, I think I might have done a little wee.
Okay, but still, the new characters just lack the charm and the unique personalities from the previous games, which is just another miss for me. Maybe it'll be rectified with the new addition of characters later on, like DJ Scully coming soon, but I don't think nostalgia can save an entire cast of new characters that we're supposed to accept as replacements of the old one. And the ultimates, or just gadgets, are still the same. Let me just explain real quick. I don't have a problem with these. I mentioned in my last review that I think some of them are pretty cool, like the Ninja's Grapple. The main issue I had is that in gameplay, it feels like you need to use them out of necessity, because of how they balance the gameplay loop around them. Scrapes and flesh rounds become hard to kill on harder difficulties for certain perks and loadouts, so the only way to effectively take them out is to just use your ability. You're probably thinking, well of course, they added that ability for you to use, so why not use it? And you'd be correct. But they have a long cooldown, so after killing one of them, well, good job. 5 flesh pounds just spawned to replace the one that you just killed. Now it's time to train Zeds around the map like you're playing COD Zombies, since your pea shooter gun does nothing but piss them off even more. I found myself only getting the skills that makes Foster's drone deal extra damage and everything, just so it can take out the larger Zeds faster on its own, because my weapons, despite having all the attachments maxed out, will just take so much longer to achieve the same effect. Alright, now we get to the part that a lot of you have been waiting for. What's bad? What's the worst of the worst that this game has to offer? Let's just start with the obvious here. The graphics. I said in my previous video, I think the graphics were still a work in progress. I was partially right. Partially right as in the maps are going to get upgraded. Everything else of the graphics, it really doesn't play like a game made in 2025. KF3 has a lot of problems with performance. I noticed it mostly stems from so many Zeds being on screen, plus the lighting on some maps, which I turned off. I have my settings for this video to be a mix of ultra and low. It plays okay in solo, but in multiplayer, my game can stutter and get as low as 20 FPS during an average wave. And I have a computer that's built to play games like this and render high quality videos at the same time if I wanted to. They've done multiple stress tests before the game's release, and I can say the performance is basically the same as it is right now. If you set everything to the lowest possible setting, then I'm sure the game will probably run fine for you, even though you probably sold your kidney to get your own computer. But I want my graphics to look exactly like the promo images and videos they have. Instead, if I want consistent FPS, I have to make my game look super blurry and pixelated, like Foster forgot to put on his contacts before he even stepped foot in the VTOL. They definitely dropped the ball with this, because how do the graphics in KF2 look significantly better with everything happening on screen, while in KF3 multiplayer, the same amount of violence makes my computer start choking up. I know they said in future patches they'll have some performance fixes, but it irritates me seeing one of the main selling points of the game you can't even experience as intended, because it isn't even optimized despite the extra time they had to fix these issues. So now let's talk about some of the features that are actually missing, starting with the round features. So doing things like choosing how long the waves are, they're just gone. You can't edit if they're going to be short, medium, or long. What about endless? Is there going to be an endless mode in the future like KF2's? If you couldn't tell already, KF3's waves are just locked to medium by default. It's around 5 waves, with the last one being the boss encounter. I wouldn't find this much of a problem if trying to get into a game wasn't so tedious. Like give us a server browser or create a game tab like KF2 had, so we could just immediately get into a match within seconds. It's annoying that I have to back out of 3 different menus if I want to swap from multiplayer to solo, or tinker with my perk skills, or just customize weapons. KF2 had no problem with letting you edit your perk skills before a match begins. Is there a technical limitation that's preventing me from editing skills before the match starts, or maybe even customizing weapons and using my crafting materials that I got from the previous match? And don't even get me started on the multiplayer features that are missing or just flat out broken. Going into a multiplayer game, you'll just notice immediately that you can't use text chat, you can't check your server ping or the server region. The leaderboard actually doesn't even show this important info. Actually, if you want to use a leaderboard, it forces you to look at this full screen version of it, and it completely stops you from playing the game. So if you quickly want to check something, well, too bad. You just got caught by a scrake, so good luck. Then after you die from said scrake, you gotta wait for the UI transition on the leaderboard to show up, so then it shows you whose smoke alarm is actually beeping in the background, so that you can go to another separate menu just to mute them. If you actually want to communicate with your team for some reason, then you're forced to either use the callout wheel or talk with your mic. And let me tell you something with the voice chat. The average Killing Floor player is probably as smart as a Neanderthal, so good luck socializing or getting any form of callout from them.
Can we kiss? I love you.
And I'm turning off.
Yo, chill. Save it for the zombies.
Bro, you can hear this dude's heartbeat. You fucking mic out.
Help! 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 Ah! Oh my god! Oh my god! Oh my god! Help! Help!
I thought he was
Oh! Thank you!
Bro,
It's so beautiful! You look even beautiful when you're helping me!
The latency in multiplayer is actually terrible. I can't tell if it's my own connection or it's the servers, because there's actually no way to tell in the game. Zeds get illegal hits on you all the time, the delayed attacks makes you bounce around the room like a ping pong table, shots feel like they don't register when they should have, and all this just amounts to a terrible multiplayer experience that just discourages me from even wanting to play with other people. It's like I'm playing Halo Infinite again on release, with this terrible desync that they actually never fully fixed. Not only are they taking elements from Payday 3 for this game, they're doing the same with Halo Infinite. Like, just take the good qualities from these games and just not the bad ones. Killing Floor's selling point is that it's a co-op shooter. I don't want to be fighting Zeds on my own. I want to fight an army of them with my friends. And on top of the server issues, the third-person animations and sounds in multiplayer just don't properly sync up sometimes. If you glance at a teammate sometimes, they're just going to be standing there using their mind to tear Zeds apart. This can actually happen with the Zeds too, which is partly why it seems like they're getting hits on you when it should have never landed. This is the biggest travesty of this release, because how is it that basic features that were in the past 2 games aren't even available on launch for the third? And then we have to wait for a future update to include them? Is that update going to be the next one? Is it going to be a month from now? Next year? Like, where is it? But hey, at least the Battle Pass and store system works perfectly fine, just like it did in the beta months ago. It's just a sad display of where development priorities were. And we finally get to see the main story of KF3 with the story missions. And it's just a fat nothing burger. I finished all of the story missions on release day, and I'm going to be honest with you, it didn't feel like it was progressing towards anything, nor was it interesting enough to keep me paying attention to what was going on. The formula of the story missions are still unchanged from the beta. It's just go to a certain map, interact with something, play audio log, end the game. You don't even need to survive, by the way. You could actually die as soon as you finish the last step on most missions, and it'll count as complete. It's just depressing because there was just so much they could have done with the campaign mode. I'm just still in shock how the best objective mode we've gotten for Killing Floor was from Killing Floor 1, a game back in 2009. How is it that the basic concepts that they introduced in that game are not able to be expanded upon in KF3? The objectives could have been so much more on these maps, especially because they had so much time to upgrade them since the beta. At least KF2 made an attempt to be interesting with some of them, even if it wasn't that good compared to the first game. It's like they forgot there was supposed to be a coherent story, so they just added these in at the last minute. People don't want to listen to audio logs as the main campaign step. This isn't a Ubisoft game. This is killing floor. I know lore isn't the game's strength, but you could have definitely made the objectives more interesting gameplay-wise. It should feel like we're working towards something at the end of the mission, and just barely surviving by the skin of our teeth. But instead, the incentive to do these is just for the XP reward for beating each one. In every killing floor game, it seems like they retcon a lot of the parts of the story, so it's safe to say the lore really isn't that important. You're probably telling yourself I'm just being a nerd and I should complain about some of the real issues here, but it feels like you should be paying attention to the lore when they bring up all these notes in the codex and what's happening in the story missions. Are they just wiping the slate clean for the 4th time in a row? The story itself could have been so much more interesting as well, since this is supposed to be the foundation of this game's timeline. Just looking at the codex, it's implied that the Zeds are mass-produced and sold to others. Are wars in the future fought only with Zeds now? Just how dystopian is this future with Horzine? Is every nation on Earth bending the knee to them? What's the public view of Horzine with the Zed outbreaks continuing to happen all over the world, just like in the early 2000s? There's a lot to work with here. There could have been a better narrative than what we got as a first step here. They could have further explored the themes of not being beholden to corporations, since Horzine supposedly has a chokehold on society, and the possible future of the military-industrial complex, with Zeds not just being a freak evolution of medicine, but now warfare. The discovery of Meyer just doesn't feel that interesting, and you don't feel the impact it could have on the world besides the audio logs telling you it's supposed to be important somehow. I really hope the future of these stories are more than just audio logs and cookie-cutter objectives on certain maps. Even if you don't like the setting of the game, there's a lot of potential in its storytelling alone. And I didn't address this in my beta review, but I did see one video showing the insane amount of damage types in this game. I didn't even realize this in the beta, but on release I opened the codex and saw there's 9 damage types that you have to keep track of. All of them with their own effective, neutral, ineffective, and affliction entries. Okay, real quick for everyone who made it this far. Can you tell me without looking it up right now, what is the weakness of the Meyer enemies? If you guessed I don't know, then you'd be right, because after reading it in the codex myself, I don't even know either. Okay, I know in KF2 they also had a bunch of damage types for their weapons, but at least in that game it felt simple and easy to figure out as you play. Here it doesn't feel like a rock, paper, scissors type of deal. Each damage type is effective against certain enemies, but don't have bonuses to others, and then the rest of the enemies are resistant to it. Like, there's nothing that tells you this during gameplay besides realizing, hey, wait a minute, the boss isn't taking that much damage from my weapon because of its damage type. Oh well. Time to shoot at it for an extra 5 minutes. And they made most of the important Zeds have its own resistant and weakness types for some reason. Like, how the fuck was I supposed to figure out without looking at the codex that every boss in the game right now is weak or strong against unique damage types that none of them share? If you really care about this stuff, then you really can't plan your loadout around it. Because there's just so many damage types to base your loadout around for these bosses, you'll never be able to fit them all together and then guess which boss is actually going to spawn. I have no idea what Tripwire is expecting the player to get from this. I don't even think the devs could name all these off the top of their head either. It just feels like they're trying to be more unique with the gunplay, but instead just overcomplicate it more than it should have been. If they combine some of these damage types together, like the acidic and biological damage together, they could probably make it easier to understand, but at the end of the day, it's just way too complex for a mechanic where its biggest impact to gameplay is to just kill enemies slightly slower or faster. Even with all the new content they added in the beta, KF3 still misses the mark with many features. If anything, this game should have had another year to cook instead of just a couple months, just to fix all the problems right now, and include the new content that'll be added later this year as base features. Killing Floor works best as a game to kick back with friends and celebrate its violence and power fantasy, but in its current state, I can see many people skipping over it for the current alternatives. Now with all that said, with the positive and negatives, here's my summary. Killing Floor 3 is a decent co-op horror survival shooter that takes place far in the future from its other 2 main entries. It thematically strays away from its realistic, grunge, dirty setting, and goes all in on the sci-fi theme with the new characters, weapons, and Zed designs. Gameplay-wise, it's a hit or miss whether some mechanics got completely overhauled, or the same, if not worse, from the previous games. While right now the game does have its own flaws and a lack of content in some areas that die-hard fans might care about, these were similar problems with KF2 when that game first released. If seeing the development cycle of KF2 is anything to go off of, I don't think Tripwire has any intentions of dropping support and sweeping the game under the rug after launch. Killing Floor as a series really is the potential man of the gaming world, considering how they bounced back with KF2. They could definitely pull it off here again, but they'd really have to put in the time and effort to make that work. It really pains me to say this, but at the time of recording this, for me, Killing Floor 3 is a 6 out of 10 at best. With the roadmap and promises the developers gave us so far, this could potentially change to a 7 or even 8 out of 10. But that's if they really nail those future updates. As its own standalone title within a vacuum, Killing Floor 3 is a decent start to a new game. But as a third main installment in the Killing Floor series, it needs some serious work before it's even considered an upgrade from the other two. I really believe this game could get better because it does seem like Tripwire does care. But for a lot of people, first impressions do matter, and they fumbled that hard with a lot of people in the community who supported them for years, despite KF2's drop in update quality over time. If you really want to get your hands on KF3, the price is okay for the content currently in the game, and the updates that'll soon follow. But if you really want more bang for your buck, I would just buy KF2 for now, since it could go on sale for really cheap nowadays, has 10 years worth of content, and plus mod support. Then maybe in a year from now, just see if KF3 is in a state that you'd actually want to play it in. Anyways, that'll be it for me. I hope you enjoyed my review on KF3's release. Despite how negative I might have sounded earlier, I really do have fun playing this game, trust me. What's your thoughts on KF3? Let me know in the comments. Maybe I'll continue making Killing Floor content if you guys are interested. Just remember to like and subscribe for more high quality content like this one. Right now, I'm going to get back to playing KF3, so I'll see you guys in the next one.